Brent Porcio, TopVelocity.net. 3x pitch BioMetrics here of Seth Stewart from 3x Velocity Camp. Take him through his delivery. This pitch was at 68. Looking at hip positions, see the left leg, which is the yellow check, is pretty neutral. I would say more even in internal rotation. Because you can see the tibia is really off with the leg internally, with the knee inward. So a lot of internal rotation. We want to be holding external rotation, so we want to see that knee turning outward, more towards basically more over the foot at this point. See, abduction is at 5, or that's adduction. So we want to be into abduction. We want to see a negative there of say 30, 40. So that's a collapsing leg. As we can see, there's a lot of trunk lean too, as well into that position, and it's more than likely because he's going to want to pull off and rotate. So not a good loaded position. I think if we're going to correct the loaded position and really kind of lay out the way it needs to work, then it would look something like this. Here's the hip. We would want the femur over here, and here's the knee, and then we'd want the foot somewhere like right there at that point. We'd want the trunk, if I turned it forward, you'd want the trunk to be almost upright. You could be slightly leaning forward in that position. Let's follow the hips going into front, and also to the arms cocking, so we're going to be into early arm cocking here. But we go into front foot, you can see front side is also flying open. So typically what could be supporting a lot of the back leg internally rotating and collapsing is the front side opening. So we should be closed at this point, more torsion in the back knee, more abduction. And then you see you hit front foot, you're not getting a lot of hip rotation. If we went and looked at hip rotation, let's see. About 29 degrees at this point. Not a lot of hip drive because the back leg was just collapsing. Arms now hyperabducted, which can be linked to impingements. If we go the elbow too above the shoulder, you're not going to see a lot of hip to shoulder separation as well. If we look at hip line to shoulder line, you can see pretty much synced up at this point. And as he goes into maximum external rotation, not much hip to shoulder separation. So at front foot, I would say not a lot of early trunk rotation, just not a lot of hip drive, hip to shoulder separation. And from there, the trunk's not going to really want to go forward because there's not a lot of momentum in the trunk at this point. So if we looked at some of the trunk positions, let's take a look at the torso graph. We can see hip to shoulder separation is actually shown at 7 degrees. And then the trunk position is neutral, pretty neutral, and leaning back towards the rubber. And then as we go into maximum external rotation, this arm's obviously dragging a little bit more dramatically than it is, but there is arm drag because there wasn't much separation. The trunk is pretty much not going forward. At this point in a high velocity pitcher, the green check would be somewhere around 30, 35. So when you don't have a lot of power in leg drive because you rotated earlier, you collapse, then you're not going to transfer a lot of forward trunk tilt, which is highly correlates to ball velocity. So you can see as it goes into pitch release, trunk positions go more to that 35, 40, but you can see front leg is pretty much straight up and down. So we need to be in a lower center of mass with the hips more behind the front leg, and the front leg extending but back towards the hip. So a really upright position at release just shows that there wasn't a lot of power into front foot, momentum hitting front foot, because if you have a lot of momentum hitting front foot, the front foot's going to get in a more linear position to transfer all that energy. When you don't have that, the front foot, everything's going to stay standing up, the front foot is going to land straight up. And you're just going to rotate to release, which is basically what's going on. As far as contralateral, 39 degrees, or actually not 39. So chest is 7. So not really, I was worried at front foot strike, or at least initially coming out of leg lift, and the trunk was leaning so far forward back here, about at this point right here, that it was just going to pull off and keep going contralateral. And it's not. It's probably because the front leg maybe, I don't even know. Obviously, I wouldn't say there's too much glove pull. So if we look at the sequencing, it might not be too dramatically bad. And I think that's the key here, is the hips are late. So the hips didn't do their job because the back leg collapsed. But you can see when the trunk is peaking in rotation, the glove, which is the blue dot, the trunk is the green dot, the blue dot is still coming late. So there's a big plus here. Seth is not pulling his glove side aggressively. That's why it doesn't fly off into a lot of contralateral tilt. So if he can just reverse the hip peaks to the trunk peaks and basically put them in reverse where the hips drive ahead of the trunk, the glove side is really going to support a good hip to shoulder separation, a good forward transfer of the trunk. So it's good to see how you don't get a lot of contralateral tilt pulling to the glove side, big spin off into pitch release when your glove side isn't peaking that early. And you can see that blue dot is peaking after the trunk, which really shows he's not pulling glove side. So that's a big plus there. He just needs to get stabilized back leg, open later, drive more momentum power into front foot, and that should help enhance separation, and then just letting the trunk transfer, which I think he's going to do well at that point, because he's showing that he's not going to pull early or try to swing around, or he's going to just stabilize, which we see the front leg extending and stabilizing, and he's going to get the trunk really moving. It's really going to work for him at that point.